You thief, you'll learn the most painful lesson of your life." The widow, her face contorted with fury and her heart hardened by loss, screamed, dragging the small, hungry girl out of her kitchen, where the child had dared to steal a little milk. The girl's eyes, brimming with tears and fever, pleaded for mercy as she was mercilessly pushed into the darkness of the icy forest, a cruel punishment for her desperation. The widow turned away, leaving her alone in the wild night, unaware that, deep in the woods, a pair of wise eyes was already watching, and what the deer were about to do would change everyone's destiny forever. The small girl, whose name no one seemed to remember, felt the cold of the forest embrace her like a shroud of ice. Each dry leaf beneath her bare feet was a whisper of fear. The fever, once merely bothersome, now burned, making the world spin. Her knees, weak from hunger, gave way, and she fell onto the damp earth, tears and dirt mixing on her pale face. The abandonment weighed more heavily than hunger, a pain that pierced her childlike soul. She tried to stand, but her body wouldn't respond. Trembling uncontrollably, the darkness of the woods swallowed the last rays of sun, and with them hope. It was then that a subtle movement caught her attention. Amidst the trees, slender, graceful silhouettes began to emerge. An entire herd of deer. Their large, dark eyes, reflecting the faint light, showed no threat, only curiosity. At the front, a majestic stag, with imposing antlers and a gaze of centuries of wisdom, approached slowly. It stopped a few steps from the girl, lowering its head with unexpected gentleness. The little girl, despite her dread, felt a strange calm invade her heart. The warmth of the deer's bodies, grouped around her, formed a shield against the biting cold, and the scent of earth and moss brought primitive comfort. The elder stag touched its soft muzzle to the child's outstretched hand, a gesture of pure compassion. The fever seemed to subside under that magical touch. Slowly, with the stag leading and the rest of the herd protecting her flanks, the little girl was guided. Without words, only the silent communication of nature. The deer led her through bushes, around roots and stones, always in a direction that, to the girl, was unknown, but to them a clear path. Meanwhile, in the mansion, Ilara, the widow with a heart of stone, watched from the shadows of the window. She couldn't sleep. The image of the little girl trembling in the forest haunted her. A shiver ran down her spine, not from the cold, but from a feeling she had long not recognized. Guilt. She chastised herself for such weakness, but her eyes were irresistibly drawn to the edge of the forest. And then she saw them. The scene was surreal, almost a dream. The herd of deer, illuminated by the pale moonlight, emerging from the darkness, and in their center, the small figure of the little girl. She walked, or rather was led, appearing stronger, less fragile. The animals surrounded her with protective reverence, like the most precious of creatures. The elder stag, with its silent majesty, led the procession, and with each step, the little girl seemed to regain a bit of her vital strength. Ilara felt a lump in her throat. What was this? A mirage, a divine intervention? Her eyes fixed on the child's purity, who now approached the mansion gates, escorted by that almost mystical vision. The widow's heart of stone began to crack, a sharp but purifying pain flooding her chest. Remorse, long dormant, awakened with overwhelming force. She had cast an innocent child to the mercy of nature, and nature, in its infinite wisdom, was returning her, not as a thief, but as a gift, a miracle. Ilara felt tears well up, streaming down her face. The tears streaming down Ilara's face were not of sadness, but of a profound shock, a revelation that shook the foundations of her being. Her heart, once an impenetrable fortress of pain and bitterness, now opened painfully, but with a strange sweetness. She ran down the stairs, her steps echoing in the mansion's silence, and opened the heavy iron gates. The scene that awaited her was even more vivid in the moonlight. The little girl stood there, supported by the herd of deer that surrounded her like silent guardians. The elder stag, with its wise eyes, looked at Ilara, and for an instant the widow felt judged but also understood. With an almost imperceptible nod from the stag, the herd began to disperse, disappearing into the darkness of the forest as mysteriously as it had appeared. The little girl, now alone before Ilara, looked like a small porcelain statue, fragile and frightened. Her large, tear-filled eyes, once full of fever and despair, now carried a mixture of exhaustion and an innocence that pierced the last vestige of Ilara's armor. The widow knelt, extending her trembling hand. "Come, my child," her voice sounded hoarse, almost unrecognizable to herself. There was no anger, only a gentle invitation. The girl hesitated for a moment, but the tiredness and fever that still tormented her made her take an uncertain step. Ilara enveloped her in her arms, feeling the tiny, feverish body. The smell of earth and dry leaves clinging to the child's skin was a vivid reminder of her cruelty. She held her close, an embrace that was both a plea for forgiveness and a silent promise. She carried the little girl into the mansion, no longer as an intruder, but as a new-found treasure. Inside the house, the warmth of the fireplace seemed to welcome the small figure. Ilara took her to one of the guest rooms, a room that had remained untouched for decades, covered in white sheets. With hands that once only knew how to command, the widow prepared a warm bath, gently washing away the dirt and cold of the forest. The girl's skin was pale and marked, but under the warm water, a little color returned to her cheeks. Ilara dressed her in a soft nightgown, found in an old chest, and nestled her in bed under warm blankets. As the girl fell into a deep, well-deserved sleep, Ilara sat beside her, watching each gentle breath. Remorse was a wave that engulfed her, but alongside it, a new and powerful feeling was born: love. She had been blinded by the pain of her own loss, transforming into a bitter and insensitive figure. The sight of that child, abandoned by her and miraculously returned by nature, was a mirror reflecting her hardened soul and the urgency of her redemption. That small being, nameless, homeless, had arrived in her life so dramatically, and now, Ilara knew, she could no longer live without her. The mansion, once a mausoleum of her own solitude, seemed to breathe again. The quiet of the night was filled not by emptiness, but by the promise of a future. Ilara gently touched the girl's hair, a gesture of affection she thought she had forgotten. From that moment on, the little girl would not just be the rescued orphan, but the daughter that destiny, in its mysterious wisdom, had delivered to her. A new purpose blossomed in the widow's heart, a purpose of love, care, and a human connection she had rejected for so long. Ilara remained there, watching over the child's peaceful sleep, feeling the warmth of hope rekindle in her chest. The night advanced, but for Ilara it was as if a new dawn was breaking, bringing with it the promise of a transformed life, guided by compassion and the unconditional love she now felt. She knew the journey would be long, but she was ready for every step, for every challenge, for she had found the redemption her heart so longed for. The next morning brought a soft light that filtered through the heavy curtains of the guest room, revealing to Ilara the serene image of the sleeping girl. Her brown hair spread across the soft pillow, and her breathing was calm and regular. Ilara felt a tightness in her chest, not of pain, but of a complex emotion that blended relief, remorse, and a strange yet powerful hope. She rose from the chair beside the bed, her muscles stiff from the sleepless night, and walked to the window. The village still slept under the veil of morning mist, oblivious to the transformation that had occurred within that mansion. The widow touched the cold glass, her eyes fixed on the edge of the forest, where the herd of deer had performed its miracle. The image of that elder stag, with its wise eyes, remained etched in her mind, a constant reminder of her cruelty and the purity that had confronted her. The journey of redemption, she knew, would not be easy. How could a woman who had cultivated bitterness for so many years, who had pushed a hungry child into the darkness, learn to love and care? Guilt was a heavy burden, but the sight of the girl, so fragile and innocent, was also a beacon. Ilara took a deep breath, determined. There was no turning back. Destiny had given her a second chance, and she would seize it with all her might. She prepared a simple but nutritious breakfast, warm porridge with honey and a glass of fresh milk. She returned to the room and found the girl waking, her large brown eyes blinking in the light. The little girl sat up in bed, shrinking back slightly at the sight of Ilara. Fear was still there, a persistent shadow in her gaze. Ilara approached slowly, with a gentle smile she barely remembered how to make. "Good morning, little one," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Did you sleep well?" The girl merely nodded, without making a sound. Ilara placed the tray with the porridge on the bedside table. "I prepared something for you. It's warm." The girl looked at the food with evident hunger, but hesitated, as if she couldn't believe it was for her. Ilara sat down again in the chair, maintaining a respectful distance. "You don't need to be afraid," she assured, extending her hand slowly without touching her. "My name is Ilara, and you? What's your name, dear?" The girl pressed her lips together, her eyes downcast. "I don't have a name," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible. Ilara felt a pang in her heart. To have no name was to have no identity, no history. "Then we'll find a name for you," Ilara proposed, with a sparkle in her eyes. "How about Aurora? It means dawn, the beginning of a new day, like the light you brought to this house." The girl looked up, a spark of curiosity replacing the fear. "Aurora," she repeated softly, tasting the sound. A small, almost imperceptible smile appeared on her lips. Ilara felt a warmth spread through her chest. "Yes, Aurora. And now, Aurora, you need to eat." The girl picked up the spoon, still with hesitation, but the first spoonful of warm porridge seemed to melt her defenses. Ilara watched with a satisfaction she hadn't felt in a long time, as the girl ate, slowly at first, then with more appetite. Each spoonful was a small step towards healing, not just of the body, but of the soul. After breakfast, Ilara helped Aurora dress in clean, warm clothes she had found in the chest. They were a little big, but comfortable. "Let's go downstairs," Ilara suggested, extending her hand. Aurora, to Ilara's surprise, took her small hand, a gesture of trust that made the widow's heart expand. Together they descended the stairs, and the mansion, once silent and cold, seemed to come alive with the child's presence. Ilara knew that healing would take time, that Aurora's emotional scars were deep, and that she herself would need to learn to be the mother she never was. But feeling the small hand in hers, Ilara knew she was on the right path. Love, that feeling she thought she had lost forever, was beginning to blossom, transforming the mansion from a refuge of sadness into a home of hope. She smiled, a genuine smile, for the first time in many years. Ilara smiled, a genuine smile, for the first time in many years. That simple gesture from Aurora, her small hand nestled in hers, was a thread of hope weaving a new purpose into her soul. They descended the stairs to the living room, where the morning sun already bathed the dusty furniture, revealing the need for life that place craved. Ilara guided Aurora to a soft armchair near the fireplace, which she had lit to warm the room. The girl sat, still a little tense, but her curious eyes scanned the room, absorbing every detail of that new world, from the gleam of old frames to the pattern of the faded Persian rug. The days that followed were a delicate ballet of discoveries and adaptations. Ilara, once accustomed to the solitude and silence that filled the vast halls, found herself filling the mansion with soft conversations and the sound of tiny footsteps. the echo of a child's laughter she never imagined hearing there. She dedicated herself to Aurora with an intensity that surprised herself, a dedication that sprang from a place she thought was dry. She prepared nutritious meals with fresh ingredients from the garden, read stories from old books with faded covers, whose pages smelled of time and magic, and tried to teach her the letters of the alphabet, drawing them with her finger in the air or in the garden sand. Aurora, in turn, was like a flower slowly blossoming. At first, she was withdrawn, responding with monosyllables or just with her gaze, her shoulders hunched, always ready to protect herself. The nights were the hardest, with whispered nightmares that made Ilara rush to the girl's room, turning on the light and hugging her until the fear dissipated, feeling the tremor of the small body against hers. Ilara felt occasional frustration, a remnant of her old impatience and the habit of having everything her way, but each time the image of the elder stag and Aurora's pure eyes came to her mind, reminding her of the path she had chosen and the miracle that had brought her there. She learned to be patient, to listen to the girl's silence and interpret her small gestures, a shy smile that barely formed, a tight hug at bedtime that said more than 1,000 words, the way her eyes sparkled when hearing a new story or seeing a bird in the garden. Each of these moments was a victory, a brick in the construction of mutual trust. Ilara realized that it wasn't just Aurora who was being healed, it was her too. The love she gave was the love she received, and it was slowly melting the layers of ice in her own heart, revealing a tenderness she thought she had lost forever. The mansion, once a refuge for her pain and a mausoleum for her memories, was transforming into a home. Ilara opened the windows, allowing light and fresh air to enter, and even began to rearrange the rooms, imagining a play space, a small, aromatic herb garden. She thought about how the village would react to her change. The feared widow Ilara, known for her coldness and reclusiveness, now caring for an orphan. She knew there would be whispers, curious glances, and perhaps even distrust from some. But for the first time in a long time, the opinions of others did not shake her. Her priority was Aurora, the small soul that destiny had entrusted to her and who had awakened the humanity she believed to be extinct. One day, as Ilara combed Aurora's fine brown hair, the girl, who was sitting on her lap, turned and hugged her with unexpected force. "Mama," she whispered, the word so soft that Ilara almost didn't hear it, but it resonated in every fiber of her being. She heard it. The widow's heart leaped, and warm tears streamed down her face, wetting the child's hair. It was the first time Aurora had called her that, the first time she had fully accepted her as her maternal figure, a recognition worth more than all her riches. Ilara held the girl tightly, feeling the warmth and weight of that newfound love, the promise of a family she had never dreamed of. "Yes, my Aurora," she replied, her voice choked with emotion. "I am your mama." That moment sealed the connection between them, a silent promise of a future built on love, overcoming adversity and resilience. Ilara knew there would still be challenges, that society and her own old wounds might try to interfere with the peace they were building. But looking at Aurora's serene face, she felt a renewed strength, an unwavering determination. The journey of redemption was not just about correcting a mistake, but about building a new life, full of purpose and a human connection she had rejected for so long. The mansion, once a symbol of her solitude, now resonated with the promise of a family, a home where love, finally, had found its way. Ilara smiled again, a genuine smile, for the first time in many years. Ilara smiled again, a genuine smile for the first time in many years. That simple gesture from Aurora, her small hand nestled in hers, was a thread of hope weaving a new purpose into her soul. They descended the stairs to the living room, where the morning sun already bathed the dusty furniture, revealing the need for life that place craved. Elara guided Aurora to a soft armchair near the fireplace, which she had lit to warm the room. The girl sat, still a little tense, but her curious eyes scanned the room, absorbing every detail of that new world, from the gleam of old frames to the pattern of the faded Persian rug. The days that followed were a delicate ballet of discoveries and adaptations. Elara, once accustomed to the solitude and silence that filled the vast halls, found herself filling the mansion with soft conversations and the sound of tiny footsteps, the echo of a child's laughter she never imagined hearing there. She dedicated herself to Aurora with an intensity that surprised herself, a dedication that sprang from a place she thought was dry. She prepared nutritious meals with fresh ingredients from the garden, read stories from old books with faded covers, whose pages smelled of time and magic, and tried to teach her the letters of the alphabet, drawing them with her finger in the air or in the garden sand. Aurora, in turn, was like a flower slowly blossoming. At first, she was withdrawn, responding with monosyllables or just with her gaze, her shoulders hunched, always ready to protect herself. The nights were the hardest, with whispered nightmares that made Elara rush to the girl's room, turning on the light and hugging her until the fear dissipated, feeling the tremor of the small body against hers. Elara felt occasional frustration, a remnant of her old impatience and the habit of having everything her way. But each time, the image of the elder stag and Aurora's pure eyes came to her mind, reminding her of the path she had chosen and the miracle that had brought her there. She learned to be patient, to listen to the girl's silence and interpret her small gestures. A shy smile that barely formed, a tight hug at bedtime that said more than 1,000 words, the way her eyes sparkled when hearing a new story or seeing a bird in the garden. Each of these moments was a victory, a brick in the construction of mutual trust. Elara realized that it wasn't just Aurora who was being healed, it was her also. The love she gave was the love she received, and it was slowly melting the layers of ice in her own heart, revealing a tenderness she thought she had lost forever. The mansion, once a refuge for her pain and a mausoleum for her memories, was transforming into a home. Elara opened the windows, allowing light and fresh air to enter, and even began to rearrange the rooms, imagining a play space, a small aromatic herb garden. She thought about how the village would react to her change. The feared widow Elara, known for her coldness and reclusiveness, now caring for an orphan. She knew there would be whispers, curious glances, and perhaps even distrust from some. But for the first time in a long time, the opinions of others did not shake her. Her priority was Aurora, the small soul that destiny had entrusted to her, and who had awakened the humanity she believed to be extinct. One day, as Elara combed Aurora's fine brown hair, the girl, who was sitting on her lap, turned and hugged her with unexpected force. "Mama," she whispered, the word so soft that Elara almost didn't hear it, but it resonated in every fiber of her being. She heard it. The widow's heart leaped, and warm tears streamed down her face, wetting the child's hair. It was the first time Aurora had called her that, the first time she had fully accepted her as her maternal figure, a recognition worth more than all her riches. Elara held the girl tightly, feeling the warmth and weight of that newfound love, the promise of a family she had never dreamed of. "Yes, my Aurora," she replied, her voice choked with emotion. "I am your mama." That moment sealed the connection between them, a silent promise of a future built on love, overcoming adversity, and resilience. Elara knew there would still be challenges, that society and her own old wounds might try to interfere with the peace they were building. But looking at Aurora's serene face, she felt a renewed strength, an unwavering determination. The journey of redemption was not just about correcting a mistake, but about building a new life, full of purpose and a human connection she had rejected for so long. The mansion, once a symbol of her solitude, now resonated with the promise of a family, a home where love finally had found its way. Elara smiled again, a genuine smile, for the first time in many years. Elara smiled again, a genuine smile for the first time in many years. The peace she felt within the walls of her mansion, however, was not a shield against the outside world. The village, with its curious glances and old whispers, still existed. Elara knew that the news of her change, and, even more so, of a child's presence in her home, would soon spread. The feared widow, the woman with a heart of stone, now with a daughter, how would they react? Doubt lingered, but it did not diminish her determination. The next morning, Elara decided it was time to face this new reality. They needed supplies that the garden didn't provide, and Aurora needed proper shoes and clothes. "We're going to the village, my little one," Elara announced, her voice soft but firm. Aurora, who was playing with a rag doll Elara had found in a chest, looked up, a shadow of apprehension crossing her face. The outside world to her was a place of abandonment and fear. Elara knelt, holding the girl's small hands. "Don't worry, Aurora. I'll be with you, always." Aurora's tight hug was the most eloquent answer. As they walked down the hill towards the village center, Elara felt the first stares. The windows of the houses seemed to gain eyes, and conversations in the streets abruptly ceased. Women stopped their chores, men interrupted their work, all eyes fixed on the tall figure of the widow and the child walking beside her, holding her hand tightly. The whispers began, low at first, then more audible. "It's Widow Elara. And who is that child? Isn't that the girl who disappeared weeks ago? Did she bring her back after everything?" Elara felt the heat of shame and judgment, but she held her head high, maintaining her posture. Her priority was Aurora. They arrived at the small general store, the heart of the village. The owner, a stout man with a grey beard, looked at Elara with a mixture of surprise and caution. His eyes, however, lingered on Aurora, who shrank back slightly behind Elara's skirt. "Good morning, Elara," he said, his voice hoarse, trying to hide his perplexity. "How can I help you?" Elara, for the first time in years, smiled at him, a small but sincere smile. "Good morning, Mr. Barnaby. I need a few things for the house, and clothes and shoes for my daughter Aurora." The word daughter resonated in the silence of the store, and some customers who were there dropped what they were holding. Aurora, feeling the weight of so many eyes, squeezed Elara's hand even tighter. The widow noticed the girl's discomfort and, with a protective gesture, pulled her closer. "Aurora, dear, how about we choose a beautiful pair of shoes for you?" Elara said, deliberately ignoring the stares and whispers. The girl looked up, a glimmer of curiosity replacing the fear. As Elara helped her try on a small pair of soft leather boots, an elderly woman known for her sharp tongue approached. "So, Elara, what made you change your mind? I heard you abandoned her in the forest." Elara straightened up, her eyes meeting the woman's. There was no anger in her gaze, only a calm dignity. "Yes, I made a terrible mistake, Mrs. Agatha, a mistake that almost cost me my soul. But nature, in its infinite wisdom, gave me a second chance, and this child, Aurora, is my miracle, my redemption." Elara's voice was firm, and her words, laden with genuine emotion, silenced the store. Aurora, with the boots on her feet, looked at Elara, and a small smile of confidence blossomed on her lips. Elara felt a warmth spread through her chest. The journey would be long, but with Aurora by her side, she was ready to face any judgment, any obstacle, for the love she felt was the most powerful of shields. Ilara felt a warmth spread through her chest. The journey would be long, but with Aurora by her side, she was ready to face any judgment, any obstacle, for the love she felt was the most powerful of shields. Mrs. Agatha, speechless at Ilara's firm and sincere response, grumbled something inaudible and walked away, her eyes still filled with distrust, but her posture for the first time faltering. A heavy silence hung over the store. The other customers, who had been whispering, now watched the scene with a mixture of curiosity and a hint of respect. Ilara knelt again, finishing adjusting Aurora's boots, who now looked at her with silent admiration, as if Ilara's strength had enveloped her in a protective cloak. "They're perfect, my little one," Ilara said, stroking the girl's hair. "You'll be nice and warm." Aurora smiled, a more open and confident smile than Ilara had ever seen on her, and took a few hesitant steps, testing her new footwear. Ilara felt a genuine joy fill the emptiness that had once inhabited her chest. It was a new, pure feeling, born from the connection with that child. As Ilara stood up to pay for the purchases, a small, white-haired figure whom Ilara had barely noticed before approached slowly. It was Mrs. Clara, a widowed seamstress who lived modestly on the outskirts of the village, known for her kindness and for having faced many losses in her own life. She had gentle eyes, which seemed to have seen too much, but still held a light of compassion. "Ilara," Mrs. Clara said, her voice soft, almost a murmur, but it resonated in the silence of the store. I'm so sorry for your pain, and for the girls." Ilara looked at her, surprised. She expected more judgment, not empathy. Mrs. Clara extended a wrinkled hand, not to touch, but in a gesture of offering. "If you need help with her clothes or even a mending, I'm good with the needle, and I have some fabrics that might work to make a dress for Aurora, something more cheerful." The turning point was unexpected and touched Ilara deeply. It was not an offer of forgiveness, but of understanding and solidarity, coming from someone who also knew the pain of loss and the harshness of life. It was the first time anyone in the village had offered Ilara something other than paid service or a look of disapproval. Ilara felt her eyes well up, and a lump formed in her throat. She squeezed Mrs. Clara's hand, a gesture that conveyed more than words could say. "Mrs. Clara, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. This means a lot." Aurora, sensing the change in the atmosphere and the kindness in Mrs. Clara's voice, hid a little behind Ilara, but her curious eyes watched the lady with new attention. Mrs. Clara smiled at Aurora, a warm smile that reached her eyes. "Hello, little Aurora. You have a beautiful name, like the dawn." The girl, encouraged by the sweetness, gave a small nod. That moment broke the ice barrier that had surrounded Ilara for years. Mrs. Clara's offer was not just about clothes, but about a bridge, an invitation for Ilara and Aurora to reconnect with the community. It was a sign that Ilara's redemption would not be just a solitary process, but that compassion still existed in the village, ready to blossom. Ilara bought the necessary supplies, with Mr. Barnaby more cordial than usual, and with the gaze of the other customers now tinged with a milder curiosity, perhaps even an incipient acceptance. As they left the store, Ilara felt a lighter weight on her shoulders. The journey would still be long, but no longer so solitary. With Aurora's hand in hers and the promise of new fabric for a dress, Ilara knew that love and human connection were, finally, finding their way back into her life. That day in the village, which began with judgment, ended with the seed of hope planted in the widow's heart. That day in the village, which began with judgment, ended with the seed of hope planted in the widow's heart. Ilara returned to the mansion with Aurora, the girl's hand still nestled in hers, but now with a sense of lightness she hadn't experienced in a long time. Mrs. Clara's words echoed in her mind, not as a whisper of gossip, but as a genuine invitation to connection. It was the first time someone, without ulterior motives, had extended a hand to her, and it touched her deeply. That night, as Aurora slept peacefully in her room, Ilara sat by the window, watching the stars. The vastness of the sky seemed less lonely. She thought of Mrs. Clara, the kindness in her eyes, the simplicity of her offer. She decided that it wasn't just for Aurora that she would accept the help, but also for herself, as a step to dismantle the walls she had built around her own heart. The next morning, Ilara explained to Aurora that they were going to visit a new friend. "She's going to make a beautiful dress for you, my little one," she said with a reassuring smile. Aurora, though still a little apprehensive, felt the security in Ilara's voice and nodded, a small sparkle of anticipation in her eyes. They dressed in their cleanest clothes and went down the hill again, but this time the atmosphere was different. Ilara didn't feel the same weight of judgment, and Aurora seemed more confident, her steps firmer. Mrs. Clara's house was small and cozy, with a blooming garden in front and the scent of lavender and fresh fabric lingering in the air. The seamstress greeted them with a warm smile, her wrinkled eyes shining with joy at seeing Aurora. "Welcome, my dears," she said, opening her arms for a hug that Ilara and Aurora accepted with surprise and gratitude. It was a hug that spoke of acceptance, of human warmth. Mrs. Clara guided them to her small sewing room, where spools of colorful thread and fabric scraps of all textures filled the shelves. Aurora, fascinated, momentarily forgot her shyness, her large eyes scanning the room with admiration. "How about a blue dress like the summer sky?" Mrs. Clara suggested, picking up a soft, delicate fabric. Aurora looked at Ilara, who smiled and nodded. As Mrs. Clara took the girls' measurements with a soft tape measure, her fingers agile and experienced, Ilara watched the scene with a full heart. Seeing Aurora smiling, interacting with another person so naturally, was an invaluable gift. Mrs. Clara talked to the girl about colors, buttons, ribbons, and Aurora responded with small gestures and shy but genuine smiles. The seamstress, with her silent wisdom, was weaving not just a dress, but also a bond of trust and belonging. Ilara felt a wave of gratitude. That simple gesture from Mrs. Clara was opening doors, not just to the community, but to Ilara's own soul. It was a reminder that kindness existed, even in the most unexpected places, and that redemption was a path paved by small acts of love and acceptance. As they said goodbye, Aurora hugged Mrs. Clara with an affection that surprised Ilara. "Thank you," the girl whispered, her voice still low but full of sincerity. Mrs. Clara held her close, her eyes moist. "You're welcome, my flower. I'll be back soon with your dress." Ilara and Aurora returned to the mansion, the afternoon sun painting the sky with golden hues. Aurora chattered about the fabrics and colors, her childlike joy overflowing. Ilara listened to her, a soft smile on her lips. That day had been another step in the journey, a step that showed Ilara that the rebuilding of her life and Aurora's healing would not be solitary. The seed of hope planted by Mrs. Clara was beginning to germinate, promising a future where human connection and love would truly flourish. Ilara and Aurora spent the following days in an atmosphere of expectation and affection. The mansion, once an echo of silence, now resonated with Aurora's soft laughter and their quiet conversations. Ilara felt a lightness in her heart that surprised her every dawn. The memory of Mrs. Clara's kindness was a balm for old wounds, and the widow found herself smiling without realizing it, a smile that reached her eyes. A few days later, a gentle knock on the mansion door announced Mrs. Clara's arrival. Ilara greeted her with genuine warmth, and Aurora, who was by her side, hid a little but soon approached curious. Mrs. Clara carried a fabric-wrapped parcel in her hands, revealing a sky-blue dress with small mother-of-pearl buttons and a delicate ribbon at the waist. "Here it is, my little flower," Mrs. Clara said, extending the garment to Aurora with a smile. Aurora's eyes widened. She touched the soft fabric with hesitant fingers, and a sparkle of pure joy lit up her face. Ilara knelt, helping the girl put on the new outfit. The dress fit perfectly, and Aurora twirled, the skirt swirling lightly, a spectacle of innocence and happiness that filled Ilara with emotion. "It's beautiful, Aurora," Ilara whispered, stroking the girl's hair. "Mrs. Clara is very talented." Mrs. Clara watched the scene with a complacent look. "It's a joy for me to see the little one so happy," she said, and her eyes met Ilara's. "You know, Ilara, life plays tricks on us, but it also offers us second chances, and you are taking yours with a heart that I know is good." Mrs. Clara's words were not a judgment, but a recognition, and Ilara felt a warmth spread through her chest, an acceptance she dared not hope for. That same day, Ilara decided to take Aurora for a walk through the busier part of the village, not just to show off the new dress, but to continue breaking the ice. This time, the looks were different. There was still curiosity, but less hostility. Some women nodded, others offered small smiles. Ilara, with Aurora firmly holding her hand, returned the nods and smiles, her heart beating with new courage. As they passed through the square, a group of children was playing. Aurora, in her blue dress, stopped for an instant, watching them with a mixture of longing and shyness. Ilara noticed the yearning in the girl's eyes. "Do you want to go play a little, Aurora?" she asked, her voice soft. Aurora hesitated, but curiosity overcame fear. Ilara encouraged her with a gentle push on her back. "Go, my little one. I'll be here watching." Aurora took a few hesitant steps towards the children, who stopped playing and watched her. A slightly older girl with red braids smiled and extended her hand. "Do you want to play with us?" Aurora looked at Ilara, who nodded with an encouraging smile. The orphan girl, once alone and hungry, was now invited to a game, a small but significant step in her journey of healing and integration. Ilara watched from afar, her heart overflowing. That was the true miracle, to see Aurora blossom and to feel that through her, Ilara herself was finally finding her place in the world, no longer as the feared widow, but as a mother, and as part of a community that slowly embraced her. The journey of redemption was a path of many hands, and Ilara was ready to walk it. With love and hope truly guiding her steps, Ilara watched Aurora play, her heart overflowing with an emotion so pure it almost brought her to tears. The girl with red braids, Lydia, held Aurora's hand, pulling her into a circle of children singing an old village song. Aurora, initially shy, soon loosened up, her small feet tapping the ground to the rhythm of the melody, a wide, genuine smile lighting up her face. Ilara felt a lump in her throat, a bitter-sweet mixture of remorse for the past and gratitude for the present. This was the Aurora she had stolen from herself and the world, and now she saw her blossom in all her innocence and joy. As the children played, Mrs. Clara approached Ilara, a warm smile on her lips. "It's a beautiful sight, isn't it, Ilara?" Her soft voice commented, her eyes fixed on the scene. Ilara nodded, unable to tear her eyes away from Aurora. "More than I ever imagined, Mrs. Clara. I never thought I'd feel something like this again." The seamstress placed a gentle hand on Ilara's arm, a gesture of comfort and complicity. "Life is full of surprises, my dear. And love, Ilara, love has a power of transformation that defies any darkness, any hurt, no matter how deep." Their conversation was interrupted by a group of passing women. This time, their gazes were different. There was still a hint of curiosity, But the hostility seemed to have diminished, replaced by a milder observation. One of them, Mrs. Fatima, one of the oldest residents of the village, nodded to Ilara, a small smile. "It's good to see little Aurora playing," she said, her voice kinder. "It seems the village has gained new joy, and the square a new brightness." Ilara felt a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't an explicit forgiveness, but a sign of acceptance. She returned the smile with joy, a gesture unthinkable weeks ago, feeling, for the first time, truly part of something larger. Aurora, tired from playing, ran to Ilara, her eyes sparkling and her blue dress a little rumpled. "Ilara, Ilara, I made a new friend. Her name is Lydia, and she taught me a song." The joy in the girl's voice was contagious, pure and vibrant. Ilara knelt, hugging Aurora tightly, inhaling the scent of earth, grass and childhood that emanated from her. "How wonderful, my little one. I'm so happy for you, for your new friend, and for that song." She kissed the top of Aurora's head, a gesture that had become natural, full of a love that once seemed impossible. That day, Ilara and Aurora returned to the mansion with light hearts, certain of an important step in both their journeys. The mansion, once isolated and silent, began to feel like a home, a place from which they could connect with the outside world without fear, with a sense of belonging that Ilara had never imagined. Ilara began to dedicate her mornings to teaching Aurora to read and write, using the dusty books from her vast library. The girl, with her insatiable curiosity, absorbed every word, every story, and Ilara discovered a new joy in sharing knowledge, in seeing the world through Aurora's curious eyes. Afternoons were filled with walks through the mansion's gardens, where Ilara showed Aurora the different flowers and herbs, telling her about their properties and the mysteries of nature. Aurora, in turn, taught Ilara to see beauty in small things, a butterfly landing on a petal, the song of a hidden bird, the shape of clouds in the sky, the vibrant colors of a sunset. The connection between them deepened each day, weaving a tapestry of mutual love and learning, of healing and rediscovery. Ilara felt that Aurora was not just her responsibility, but her guide, showing her a world of simplicity and wonder that she had forgotten amidst her pain and isolation. The village, in turn, continued to observe, but with a milder, more welcoming curiosity. Small gestures of kindness began to emerge, a basket of fresh fruit left at the mansion door by a neighbor, an invitation for afternoon tea from Mrs. Clara, a longer, more sincere wave from Mr. Barnaby. Ilara accepted each of these gestures with a humility that was once foreign to her, understanding that redemption was not a single event, but a continuous process, built brick by brick, heart by heart, with the patience and kindness of those around her. One afternoon, as Ilara and Aurora picked ripe strawberries in the garden, the girl looked at Ilara with unusual seriousness, her large eyes fixed on the widow's. "Ilara," she began, her voice low, almost a whisper, do you really love me?" Ilara stopped, her heart squeezed by the vulnerability of the question. She knelt, holding Aurora's small hands in hers, her thumbs caressing the soft skin. "More than words can say, my little one. You are the greatest gift life has given me, the light that illuminated my darkness." Aurora's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of relief and happiness streaming down her rosy cheeks. She hugged Ilara with all her strength, and Ilara felt that, in that tight embrace, all her past pains, all her fears and regrets were being healed, washed away by the purity of that love. It was a love that united them, strong and unbreakable, ready to face whatever came. A love that promised a future of hope and belonging. The days unfolded into a routine of discovery and affection at the mansion. Ilara and Aurora continued to weave the tapestry of their love, each thread stronger and more vibrant than the last. Mornings were filled with the melody of Ilara's voice, reading stories, and Aurora's laughter as she learned a new word. Afternoons, with the scent of garden flowers and the warmth of the sun on their faces as they explored every corner of the property, hands held, hearts connected. Ilara felt a peace she never imagined possible, a contentment that radiated from Aurora and enveloped her completely. The village was preparing for the Harvest Festival, an annual event that celebrated the bounty of the land and the unity of the community. The square would be decorated with garlands of flowers and fruits. There would be music, dancing, and a large shared meal. Mrs. Clara, during one of her visits, had insisted that Ilara and Aurora participate. "It's a time to celebrate life, Ilara," she had said, with a look that went beyond words, inviting her to fully embrace her new life. Ilara hesitated. The idea of exposing herself to so many eyes, even if now milder, still disquieted her. But then she looked at Aurora, whose eyes sparkled with the promise of festivity and joy. The girl had never experienced anything like it. Ilara felt a surge of courage, an unwavering desire to provide Aurora with all the joys life could offer. It was no longer about her own fear, but about the girl's happiness. She nodded to Mrs. Clara, a shy but determined smile on her lips. On the day of the festival, the square buzzed with life. The air was sweet with the smell of fresh bread and wildflowers. Aurora, in her sky-blue dress, ran among the children, her hair flying, her laughter contagious. Ilara watched her closely, sitting on a bench, feeling like a stranger, yet at the same time a guardian. People passed by, some waved, others smiled openly. The ice was truly breaking. Suddenly, a sharp cry cut through the merriment. A young mother, her face pale, desperately searched for her small child. "Pedro! Pedro!" she called, her voice choked with panic. The crowd began to stir, and a murmur of concern spread. Ilara, with a knot in her stomach, felt her heart race. She remembered the forest, the darkness, Aurora's fear. Without thinking, she stood up. With an agility that surprised herself, Ilara began to move through the crowd, her eyes scanning every face, every corner. She had a sharp memory for details, a skill developed over years of solitary observation. She spotted a small straw hat, which she had seen on Pedro earlier, near the caramelized apple stand. With a quick gesture, she bent down, and there was the boy, hidden among the women's skirts, frightened and teary-eyed, but unharmed. Ilara picked him up in her arms, calming him with sweet words and a gentle hug. She took him to his mother, who collapsed in tears of relief, clutching her son to her. The crowd's gaze turned to Ilara, but this time there was no judgment, only gratitude and admiration. Mr. Barnaby, who was nearby, took off his hat in a gesture of respect. Mrs. Clara approached, her eyes moist, and squeezed Ilara's hand tightly. "You are a good woman, Ilara," she whispered, her voice full of pride. In that moment, as Ilara felt the warmth of Mrs. Clara's hands and saw the grateful smile of Pedro's mother, she knew she had reached the climax of her redemption. It was not a grand event, but a simple act of kindness that dismantled the last barriers. Aurora ran to her, hugging her legs. Ilara knelt, kissing the girl's forehead, and felt that finally she was no longer the feared widow, but an essential part of that village, a beloved mother, and a woman whose heart had blossomed in its fullness. The warmth of Mrs. Clara's hands and the grateful smile of Pedro's mother filled Ilara with a sense of belonging that transcended any wealth or power. She was no longer the isolated figure, but a vital link in the tapestry of that village. Aurora, still clinging to her legs, lifted her face, her blue eyes reflecting the purity of a summer sky. "You're the best, Ilara," the girl whispered, and the simplicity of those words was the greatest treasure Ilara had ever received. The harvest festival continued, but with a new atmosphere around Ilara. People who had once watched her with caution now approached with open smiles and words of recognition. Mr. Barnaby, with his deep voice, expressed everyone's gratitude. Ilara, your act of kindness today reminded us of the true spirit of our community. We are grateful for your courage. Other voices joined in, weaving a chorus of acceptance that made Ilara's heart swell with emotion. She felt tears in her eyes, but they were tears of joy and relief, washing away the last remnants of her old pain. That night, under a starry sky that seemed brighter than ever, Ilara and Aurora returned to the mansion. The house, once a monument to solitude, now pulsed with the life and love they had built. Aurora, tired but happy, fell asleep in Ilara's arms as the widow carried her to her room. Ilara nestled her in bed, observing the girl's serene face. That small being, who had once been abandoned by her own cruelty, had become the compass of her redemption, the living light that had guided her back to humanity. Ilara sat by the window, the gentle night breeze caressing her face. She thought of the deer, of the almost mystical intervention that had confronted her with Aurora's purity and the harshness of her own heart. That encounter in the forest had been the first step, the seed planted in barren soil. Now, that seed had blossomed into a garden of love and connection. She had learned that true value was not in material wealth, but in the richness of spirit, in the ability to love, to forgive, and to be forgiven. The mansion was no longer a refuge of isolation, but an open home, a meeting point for kindness and camaraderie. Mrs. Clara had become a dear friend, and Aurora, a beloved daughter, her laughter the constant melody that cradled their days. Ilara felt a profound peace, a certainty of purpose that filled her completely. She was no longer the feared and solitary widow Ilara, but simply Ilara, a woman who had found redemption and unconditional love, ready to embrace each new dawn, with a heart overflowing with gratitude and hope. The journey had reached its sweetest resolution. The morning sun burst through Ilara's bedroom window, painting the wooden floor with a soft gold, but the true light in her life came from within. The peace she felt was palpable, a gift earned with every step of her journey. Descending to the kitchen, she found Aurora already seated at the table, savoring a bowl of porridge, her blue eyes shining with the simple joy of a new day. The girl's laughter, once rare and shy, was now a constant melody in the mansion, filling every corner with the promise of life. Ilara sat beside her, pouring herself a cup of herbal tea, and watched Aurora with an affection that warmed her soul. That small being, who had once been a symbol of her cruelty and regret, was now the personification of her redemption, living proof that love could blossom even in the most arid soils. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, weaving a new routine for Ilara and Aurora. The mansion, once an isolated refuge, became a vibrant home, with its doors open to the friends life had brought them. Mrs. Clara was a constant presence, bringing not only fabrics and threads, but also stories and laughter, sharing the wisdom of her years. Aurora continued to blossom, her shyness giving way to a gentle confidence. She played with Lydia and the other children in the square, her hair flying in the wind, her laughter echoing freely. Ilara watched, no longer from afar, but as part of the group, exchanging words and smiles with the mothers and fathers of the village. Mr. Barnaby, Mrs. Fatima, and other neighbors now greeted her with genuine warmth, inviting her to the small events and celebrations that punctuated village life. The feared widow had disappeared, replaced by a woman who, with humility and love, had found her place. On a sunny afternoon, while helping Aurora plant sunflower seeds in the garden, Ilara felt the soft earth beneath her fingers, a sensation that connected her to life in a way she had never before experienced. She looked at Aurora, who, with hands dirty from the soil, smiled at the small seed in her palm. "Ilara, will they grow big like the sun?" the girl asked, her eyes full of wonder. Ilara smiled, stroking Aurora's hair. "Yes, my flower, just as you have grown and blossomed, and just as the love in our hearts has grown." In that moment, Ilara thought of the deer, of the almost ethereal vision that had awakened her to the truth. That encounter in the forest, which seemed like a nightmare, had in fact been the beginning of her awakening, nature's invisible hand guiding her to redemption. Life in the village continued its course, with its challenges and joys, but Ilara and Aurora faced everything together, strengthening each other. Ilara dedicated herself to community causes, using her acumen and resources to help those most in need, ensuring that no child felt the hunger or abandonment Aurora had known. She became a voice for the vulnerable, a guardian of kindness and compassion, a synonym for support and hope for all. Aurora, in turn, grew with a generous heart, radiating the light Ilara had found through her. A light that illuminated everyone around her with purity and innocence. The mansion, once a symbol of isolation and sadness, transformed into a beacon of hope, a silent testament to the transformative power of love and the human capacity for change. Ilara, who had once been the widow with a heart of stone, was now the loving mother, the loyal friend, the respected citizen. And her life, intertwined with Aurora's, was the sweetest of songs, a hymn to redemption and unbreakable human connection. With each new dawn, the promise of a bright future was renewed, confirming that life's true treasure lay in shared love, compassion, and the ability to start anew, with a heart open to the kindness the world could offer. Years passed, weaving new layers of life over the old mansion and the village. Aurora, now a 10-year-old girl, was no longer the shy, hungry child, but a graceful figure full of light, with blue eyes still reflecting the purity of her soul. Her hair, once disheveled, fell in shiny braids that Ilara combed every morning with affection. The mansion, once a refuge of silence, echoed with laughter, with the sound of turning pages, and with the melody of songs Aurora learned at the village school, a school Ilara had helped found to ensure no child was deprived of the precious gift of knowledge. Ilara watched Aurora with a heart overflowing with pride and love. The girl had become the embodiment of everything she had learned about life, the resilience of the human spirit, the beauty of compassion, and the transformative power of forgiveness. Aurora, with her innate kindness, was often seen helping the village elders, reading to Mrs. Clara, whose eyes no longer saw so well, or sharing her toys with younger children. She was living proof that love could heal the deepest wounds. Ilara, in turn, had become a respected matriarch, not for her wealth, but for her wisdom and generosity. Her acumen, once used to accumulate possessions, was now dedicated to community causes. She organized a fund for families in need, ensured the village had access to a doctor, and transformed part of her vast gardens into a community vegetable patch where everyone could harvest sustenance. Meetings at the mansion were no longer to discuss business, but to plan improvements for the community, with Ilara seated at the head of the table, listening attentively, her eyes gentle and her voice always calm and thoughtful. On an autumn afternoon, as Ilara and Aurora picked apples in the orchard, the golden sun painting the leaves in shades of red and orange, Ilara felt a profound peace. She paused, watching Aurora laugh as an apple rolled from her hands. That laughter, so pure and unpretentious, was the most beautiful symphony she had ever heard. Ilara closed her eyes for an instant, and in her mind revisited the image of the deer, of those wise eyes of the elder stag that had guided her back to humanity. The remorse of yesteryear had transformed into immense gratitude, a certainty that life, in its infinite wisdom, had given her a second chance. "Ilara, look, this apple is the most beautiful of all," Aurora exclaimed, holding out a red and shiny fruit. Ilara took the apple, feeling its cold weight in her palm, and smiled at the girl. "It is, my flower, as beautiful as you." She squeezed Aurora's small hand, their fingers intertwined, a gesture that spoke of years of love and mutual trust. The mansion, with its ancient stone walls, was no longer a symbol of isolation, but a vibrant home, a beacon of hope and a testament to the power of love. The doors were always open, and the scent of fresh bread and laughter filled its corridors. Ilara and Aurora, together, had built not just a family, but a legacy of kindness that extended throughout the village. Ilara's dark past was now just a distant shadow, overcome by the light that she and Aurora radiated. With each new dawn, Ilara awoke with a renewed purpose, knowing that her life, once marked by pain and solitude, had been rewritten with the most beautiful chapters of love, redemption, and human connection. Aurora, her heart's daughter, was living proof that kindness was the greatest wealth, and that an open heart could transform not only one life, but an entire world. Together, they would continue to weave this tapestry of love, one thread at a time, with the certainty that hope was a flame that would never extinguish, guiding them towards a future of peace and shared joy.